Imagine an island roughly the size of a football field, yet home to over 1,000 people, isolated in the vast waters of Lake Victoria. This isn't a city, nor a typical residential area, but Migingo Island, a place that challenges all notions of space, resources, and human survival in such a confined space. Here, things that seem impossible elsewhere happen daily. A small, crowded space, yet filled with countless stories that will surprise anyone. Join us on a journey to discover 15 unique things found only on Migingo Island, and be sure to tune in until the very end, because the final detail might make you reconsider everything you thought you understood about this place. Number 1. Life crammed on the world's tiniest island. Migingo Island is so small that on a map it appears almost like a faint dot in Lake Victoria. Its area is under 5,000 square meters, less than half a hectare. This number only becomes clear when compared with reality. A standard international football field is around 7,000 square meters, and Migingo is even smaller. In practical terms, the island has just enough space for a five-a-side football match, with almost no extra room. What makes Migingo unique is not its size, but the fact that over 1,000 residents have chosen to live their entire lives on this rocky outcrop in the middle of the lake. There are no buffer zones here. Houses stand closely together. Pathways exist only as narrow gaps between corrugated metal walls, and every step passes through someone else's daily life. Space constantly shifts its purpose. A morning passageway becomes a net repairing spot at noon, then a gathering place in the evening. Some residents even place their stoves outside their doors to save indoor space, blending private and communal life into one continuous environment. Surrounded by nearly 69,000 square kilometers of open water, Migingo looks like a tiny point swallowed by the lake. Yet its small size creates an unusually dense level of activity. Sounds echo rather than fade. Voices, metal noises, waves, and wind merge into a continuous background rhythm. At night, the light from fishing boats forms a bright ring around the island, making it appear like an active station in the middle of the water where every movement is concentrated. This compressed living space also creates clear limitations. There is no room to expand, no reserve area for population growth, and privacy is almost non-existent. Every decision, from adding a wall to placing a single object, must be reconsidered because space is the scarcest resource. Many families share one small courtyard for drying nets, repairing boats, or hanging clothes, and everyone must constantly adapt. Migingo is more than a settlement. It is a living example of how people organize life under conditions of extreme spatial compression. What do you think about over 1,000 people living in an area smaller than a football field? If you had to stay in Migingo for 1 month, what would be the hardest thing for you to adapt to? Number 2. An island that thrives on tilapia. Migingo Island sustains its existence through fishing, particularly its Nile tilapia. Here, fishing is not considered a supplementary activity, but rather the central economic pillar of the entire community. Most households on the island participate in the fishing-related production chain. Some go out to sea to fish, while others stay behind to handle processing, sorting, preserving, and reselling to traders. When this chain of work temporarily ceases, life on the island almost comes to a standstill. The fish that generate income for Migingo is highly valuable due to its export market. Mature Nile tilapia typically weigh between 10 and 50 kilograms, large enough to yield a significant profit per catch. The fish are immediately chilled upon arrival using ice transported from the mainland and then transferred to buyers. Prices vary depending on the season and catch, but this fish source remains a key economic pillar that sustains the island's residents. Some traders even buy fish directly at the docks at night to ensure they can be transported ashore early the next morning, thus preserving the freshness of the export catch. Fishing in Migingo doesn't require overly complex equipment, but it relies heavily on experience navigating the lake, endurance, and the ability to choose the right time to set sail. Each trip can last many hours on a vast body of water nearly 69,000 square kilometers in size, where wind and waves can change rapidly. Fuel costs, ice, and boat repairs cause profits to fluctuate. Some days, a large catch is enough to compensate for many consecutive days of losses, so people's income is usually calculated in stages. Some boats have to cooperate to share costs, especially during periods of low fish yields. Fishing not only provides income but also shapes the rhythm of life in Migingo. Eating, trading, and resting all revolve around the time the boats dock. The most familiar sounds on the island are the hum of boat engines, the clatter of fish being placed on wooden planks, and the crunch of stones falling into coolers. Even the children are accustomed to this rhythm of life, helping to transport nets and buckets of water or assisting adults in sorting the fish. Fishing not only sustains the community but also defines how the island functions each day. Number 3. The quiet life of Migingo women. On Migingo Island, women's roles aren't tied to specific occupations, but rather to a series of repetitive daily tasks that keep life on the island running smoothly. On this tiny island, women don't go out to sea at night like fishermen, but they maintain the rhythm of daytime life. Their work is quiet, continuous, and rarely publicly acknowledged. Most women handle the logistical tasks for the family. They cook, do laundry, care for children, clean, and prepare necessities. These tasks have no clear end date. A typical day begins early in the morning and continues until the island is shrouded in darkness. Limited living space means many activities take place in the same area. The sleeping area also serves as the cooking area, and the small business space becomes the family living space. Some families even share an outdoor kitchen because there isn't enough indoor space for so many activities simultaneously. Some women supplement their income by selling prepared food, dried seafood, or essential items for the island's residents. The businesses are small-scale, serving only a local area, so income fluctuates daily. Some days they sell a lot, while other days they have almost no customers. Therefore, expenses are carefully calculated, from each meal to every small expense. Some women also take on extra work mending nets or helping sort fish when opportunities arise. Limited space makes privacy a luxury. Women spend most of their time indoors or right outside their doors, where all their activities are easily visible. When there are many people in the family, they often proactively reduce their personal needs to make room for their children or relatives. Therefore, true rest is not always possible. Many can only rest when the entire island is quiet at the end of the day. Another less discussed factor is the ability to move away from the island. Not everyone has the financial means, time, or resources to travel to the mainland regularly. For many women, life unfolds in a confined, repetitive space. Major changes therefore occur very slowly, and sometimes almost never. Leaving the island only happens when absolutely necessary, such as for medical appointments or important family matters. Women in Migingo are not placed in symbolic images. They exist in the background of daily life, where responsibility outweighs choice, and a sense of stability is only temporary. How do you think long-term living in such a stagnant space might affect a person's outlook on the future? If daily life is more tied to responsibility than opportunity, would you adapt or seek change? Number 4. Life on an island without electricity. Migingo Island has no connection to the national power grid, so all electricity on the island comes from fuel-powered generators and lighting systems used for fishing. There is no central power source for the whole community. Each cluster of homes, small shops, or groups of boats must operate its own generator, creating a decentralized and spontaneous energy system very different from the mainland. As a result, electricity use depends heavily on the financial capacity of each household group. A small generator on Migingo usually has a capacity of 2 to 5 kilowatts, enough to power a few lights, charge phones, and run basic appliances for limited periods. Fuel is transported by boat from the mainland, with an average consumption of about 1 to 2 liters of diesel per hour. Because fuel is expensive, many families only run their generators for 2 to 4 hours in the evening. Electricity for daily life is therefore temporary and available only during specific hours. Some households even share fuel and use a generator together to reduce costs. By contrast, the lighting system for fishing uses more energy but is always prioritized. A fishing boat at night may operate 10 to 20 high-powered lamps to attract small fish. During peak seasons, dozens of boats work at the same time, forming a bright ring of light around the island on the water's surface. From afar, it can resemble a small floating city at night. Fuel used for fishing often exceeds the amount reserved for household needs. This priority creates 2 parallel realities. On the lake, abundant light sustains the economy. On the island, many areas fall back into darkness once generators are turned off. People cook, charge devices, and do business according to the hours when electricity is available. When fuel deliveries are delayed, household electricity time decreases immediately, while fishing continues to secure income. Some days, residents must choose between lighting their homes or saving fuel for the next trip. Electricity on Migingo is therefore not just a convenience, but a resource that must be allocated by priority. Giving precedence to fishing lights clearly shows what keeps the island community functioning. In such circumstances, which should come first, electricity for livelihood or for daily life? If you lived in a place where electricity had to be planned by the hour, how do you think your daily habits would change? Number 5. Surrounded by water, dying of thirst. Migingo Island is situated in the middle of a vast freshwater lake, but drinking water is not a consistently available resource. There is no fixed water supply system on the island. There are no pipelines, no central reservoirs of sufficient capacity, and no groundwater sources for direct extraction. Therefore, water becomes part of the daily supply chain, similar to fuel or ice, rather than a stable infrastructure like in urban areas. Even water storage depends on limited space, so many families can only store very small amounts. The residents' water supply mainly comes from rainwater and from transport by boat from the mainland. During the rainy season, families utilize any suitable surface to collect water. Simple pipes are attached to corrugated iron roofs to allow water to flow directly into plastic containers or tanks. When it rains regularly, this amount of water is sufficient for basic needs for a few days. However, rainfall is inconsistent from month to month, and prolonged dry periods quickly deplete water containers. Some households even have to share their water reserves during prolonged periods of harsh weather. When rainwater is insufficient, water must be transported from the lake shore or from locations considered to have safer water sources. Each transport typically involves containers with a capacity of about 20 to 30 liters. The cost of water therefore includes not only the purchase, but also fuel, travel time, and loading, unloading labor. Drinking and cooking water are always prioritized, while needs such as laundry or hygiene are carefully considered to avoid waste. Many families have had to change their daily routines, such as gathering laundry on a fixed day to save water. Living amidst a vast freshwater lake while still having to carry water in containers creates a very unique way of life on Migingo. Water is not used indiscriminately, not because of regulations, but because every drop is linked to a specific transportation journey. When the water supply is interrupted, the impact spreads immediately, from family life to business and fish processing. There are even times when people are forced to reduce cooking time or postpone seafood processing to prioritize water for essential needs. This makes water one of the most vulnerable elements in the island's ecosystem. How do you think living in the middle of a freshwater lake but still having to transport water in containers would change your perspective on daily needs? If the water supply were interrupted for several days, which activity on Migingo would you think would be affected first? Number 6. The territorial war over a tiny rock. Migingo Island has become notable not for its size or population, but for the long-standing sovereignty dispute between Kenya and Uganda. The core of the issue isn't the small piece of land on the rock, but the control over the fishing grounds surrounding the island. Lake Victoria is a vital fishing ground in East Africa, and a shift of just a few hundred meters on the waterline can significantly alter access to fish stocks. Tensions escalated in 2008 when Ugandan security forces established a regular presence on the island and began collecting fees from fishermen. Kenya protested, asserting Migingo's territory. During this most sensitive period, both sides maintained control, resulting in multiple overlapping administrative layers on a small rocky outcrop. The dispute didn't escalate into armed conflict, but it was enough to create a prolonged state of instability. Following bilateral negotiations, the two countries agreed to temporarily co-manage activities on the island while continuing to conduct surveys to delineate the boundary on the lake. However, determining the boundary on a body of water nearly 69,000 square kilometers is a complex legal and technical problem. Different survey results can lead to different interpretations of the boundary, making it difficult to reach a final conclusion. For the residents of Migingo, the dispute is not a distant geopolitical concept. It manifests directly in who collects fees, what documents are accepted, and which forces control access to the island. Fishermen may have to pay fees for the same activity, depending on the time and which party holds power in the area. Their livelihoods are therefore directly affected by decisions made hundreds of kilometers away. Ironically, the very fish that sustains Migingo is the cause of the island's stalemate. A small rocky outcrop becomes the intersection of economic, security, and diplomatic interests for an entire region. Number 7. The island buried under tin roofs. In Migingo, infrastructure wasn't designed for the long-term future, but rather built to meet immediate survival needs. The entire surface of the island is almost entirely covered by closely packed corrugated iron roofs and metal walls, leaving virtually no natural open space. Limited land forces all structures to be small, low, and compact. Many houses only have enough room for a few people to sit or lie down, and often serve multiple functions simultaneously, from sleeping quarters and storage to a short resting place after fishing trips. Some households even utilize the narrow front yard as a temporary living area because the interior space is too small. Building materials on the island revolve around corrugated iron, thin wood, and lightweight steel, as these can be transported by small boats and assembled quickly when needed. When a part breaks, residents can replace individual pieces instead of rebuilding the entire structure. However, this results in almost negligible thermal and sound insulation. During the day, heat is trapped under the corrugated iron roof. At night, conversations, music, and generator sounds spread throughout the small space of the island. Sound travels through thin metal walls, blurring the boundaries between private and public spaces. Remarkably, the island maintains points of community life. There are small food stalls, dry goods counters, ice stations, and simple entertainment areas. Though just a cramped space with a few light bulbs and an old speaker, these locations play a vital role in maintaining the rhythm of communal life. When living space becomes too cramped, social activities are forced to move outdoors. Common spaces thus become part of the spiritual infrastructure, keeping the community connected. For many residents, these areas provide a sense of living in a community, rather than simply existing on a rocky outcrop in the middle of a lake. The infrastructure on Migingo lacks safety buffer zones. Everything operates right up to its limits. A strong storm, a small fire, or a shortage of repair materials can affect many families at once. Even a single corrugated iron roof blown away by the wind can necessitate reinforcement of many surrounding houses. The stability here doesn't come from durability, but from the constant patching and mending needed to keep the island functioning. Number 8. What fishing on the lake really costs. According to local fishermen, to be allowed to anchor and continue operating around the island, each boat typically has to pay fees ranging from $20 to $50 per month, depending on the time of year and which party controls the area. This becomes significant compared to the average daily income of only $6 to $10 after deducting fuel and ice costs. For many small boats, the fees alone account for a substantial portion of their monthly income. In addition to anchoring fees, there are also security and inspection fees that vary from time to time. Fishermen report having to pay an extra $1 to $3 per docking. If a boat makes multiple trips in the same day, this cost quickly increases. Such fees are rarely officially documented in writing and can change at any time, making financial planning difficult. Some fishermen are forced to reduce the number of trips they make just to limit the fees incurred. Paperwork also creates indirect costs. Fishermen often carry multiple types of paperwork in case of inspections. Renewal or informal renewal can cost an additional few dozen dollars per year, a significant amount for a workforce that relies primarily on artisanal fishing. Because legal risks are ever present, many are hesitant to invest in larger boats. The price of a small motorboat on Lake Victoria ranges from $800 to $1,500, beyond the reach of many households without long-term stability. This inadvertently keeps the size of the fleet small, limiting the potential for increased fishing productivity. These costs don't stop Migingo from operating, but they leave residents' lives in a precarious balance. Income from good catches may provide a substantial short-term boost, but it's quickly eroded by mooring fees, inspection fees, and paperwork costs. For many families, the realistic goal is not to accumulate wealth, but simply to ensure they have enough money to continue going to the lake the next day. Stability, therefore, does not come from growth, but from the ability to maintain a livelihood cycle day by day. Number 9. Security comes from tight spaces. On Migingo Island, security isn't created by armed forces or surveillance cameras, but rather by the fact that no one has enough space to disappear from public view. On a small island of just a few thousand square meters, where over 1,000 people live together, every movement is easily detected. Who leaves home, who visits whom, the community is largely aware of this. The limited space has fostered a passive form of security, operating without the need for a formal management mechanism. Despite the lack of a conventional police station, serious violent incidents are rare. The main reason lies in the interdependent social structure. On Migingo, overlapping relationships act as a network. A person can simultaneously be a neighbor, a fellow fisherman, a vendor, or someone who shares living space. Any prolonged conflict can directly impact daily life and income. Therefore, minor disputes are often settled early to prevent them from escalating. In many cases, a few respected elders or boat owners will step in to mediate instead of the official law enforcement. Security on the island is also linked to the habit of recognizing familiar faces. Strangers appear infrequently and are almost immediately noticed. This doesn't require complex verification procedures. The mere appearance of a new face is enough to alert the community. The control mechanism is therefore more social than administrative, stemming from the fact that everyone knows each other. This observation isn't always coercive, but rather resembles a form of natural community surveillance. At night, when the lights are dimmed, the island doesn't fall into absolute silence. There are always people awake, chatting or sitting by the water's edge. The constant presence of people makes the shared space feel like it's always under watchful eyes. This inadvertently limits the potential for extremist behavior, as it is difficult to do something without witnesses. The security of Migingo is not an absolute guarantee. It is a fragile equilibrium, maintained by high human density and social cohesion. This shows that, in a small community, order comes not only from law, but also from the need for coexistence among interdependent individuals. Number 10. Where limited space creates unlimited unity. On Migingo Island, living standards aren't defined by the size of the houses, but by how the community shares a cramped space. On a rocky outcrop spanning only a few thousand square meters, over 1,000 residents live side by side each day. This means most homes on the island are only a few square meters, enough space for 1 or 2 mattresses, a few personal items, and very little room to move around. Some households even hang their belongings from the ceiling or place them on makeshift shelves to utilize every tiny space. The huts are so close together that the distance between 2 walls is sometimes only an arm's length. Those living inside can clearly hear their neighbors' activities, from conversations to the sounds of packing before going to the lake. The concept of privacy has almost disappeared. Instead, residents have formed unwritten rules: speak softly at night, limit noise during rest hours, and share the use of common spaces. These natural conventions help the community maintain order without formal regulations. A dwelling is rarely for just one person. Many families of 3 to 5 people share the space, and as the number increases, activities are pushed outside. The passageways between the rows of huts become multifunctional spaces, where people cook, chat, mend fishing nets, or rest. Shared space is therefore more important than individual rooms. Here, home is not just 4 walls, but also the surrounding area where everyone shares a common rhythm of life. It is noteworthy that despite the high population density, Migingo does not descend into social chaos. The reason lies in social interdependence. When people live so close together, a prolonged conflict can directly affect work and income. Therefore, minor disputes are often resolved quickly through personal acquaintances or respected community members. In many cases, a short conversation is enough to quell the conflict. Living conditions on Migingo are not ideal, but they represent a unique form of adaptation, where community cohesion somewhat compensates for the lack of private space. It demonstrates the human capacity to organize life even when space is severely limited. Number 11. When reputation replaces the law. On Migingo Island, maintaining order doesn't rely on an authoritarian police system, but rather on a social mechanism based on personal authority and timely intervention. The island has no fixed police station. Instead, elders or influential individuals in the community act as mediators when conflicts arise. In many cases, they are also boat owners, shopkeepers, or economically important members of the community, so their voices carry real weight. The process is relatively simple. When disputes arise involving money, minor altercations, or personal misunderstandings, the situation usually doesn't drag on. Those involved are invited to meet with an influential person to present their case and listen to the arbitration. The handling of these matters doesn't rely on written laws or fixed penalties, but rather on consensus and social pressure. In the cramped space where people meet daily, losing credibility means difficulties in communication, trade, and communal living. This mechanism is effective because relationships on the island are long-lasting and intertwined. A troublemaker faces not just one individual, but the entire network of acquaintances around them. Maintaining harmony is therefore pragmatic, as any prolonged conflict can directly affect the common livelihood. Many conflicts are resolved through brief conversations rather than public confrontation. However, this system also has clear limitations. It is suitable for minor conflicts, but lacks specific mechanisms for handling serious situations or when personal interests outweigh the impact of public opinion. Order on Migingo is therefore not an absolute guarantee, but a state of equilibrium based on continuous compromise between parties. This shows that the line between stability and fragility on the island is always very thin. Number 12. The island has no hospital. On Migingo Island, healthcare doesn't operate as a full-fledged system, but rather as a short-term response to health risks. The island lacks a proper hospital, a fully equipped emergency room, and a 24/7 medical team. When an incident occurs, the first reaction is often not to call a doctor, but to seek help from someone experienced in handling the situation. In many cases, this might be an elderly boat owner, someone who previously worked on the mainland at a medical facility, or someone who has experienced a similar situation. The most common health problems are minor injuries, skin infections, fever, stomach aches, or accidents in the cramped space. With the high population density, a small injury, if not treated properly, can quickly become serious. First aid relies heavily on over-the-counter medications, personal experience, and word-of-mouth advice. Some families keep a supply of simple first aid kits, such as bandages, fever reducers, or antibacterial medications for use when needed, but the supply is not always consistent. The most dangerous situations arise when emergency medical care is required. To reach medical facilities on land, patients must wait for boats, depending on the time, weather, and the condition of the lake. The journey can last for hours. In severe cases, this waiting period creates a fine line between recovery and long-term complications. If the incident occurs at night or in rough seas, the decision to travel becomes even riskier. The lack of a formal healthcare system has led residents to develop practical preventative habits. They limit activities that could easily cause injury, address unusual symptoms early, and try to avoid putting themselves in dangerous situations unnecessarily. This is not the optimal choice, but rather an adaptation in an environment where professional medical services are often delayed. This creates a kind of silent survival discipline, where caution becomes a shared habit within the community. Therefore, healthcare on Migingo is not just about treatment, but also reflects how a community organizes itself to minimize risk in the absence of medical support. Number 13. An island united by outsiders. On Migingo Island, the community wasn't formed by a choice, but by circumstances forcing people to live close together in a space that doesn't allow for separation. The island's inhabitants come from many different parts of East Africa, with diverse languages, customs, and cultural backgrounds. What they share isn't identity, but a cramped living environment and a high degree of interdependence. Many initially intended to stay only temporarily to fish, but gradually became attached to life on the island because their livelihoods depended on it. The Migingo community operates on a pragmatic principle. When space is insufficient for each person to have their own separate area, resources must be shared. Water, electricity, and common living areas are allocated based on habits formed over time, not on written regulations. Anyone who overuses resources is quickly reprimanded through social pressure. In a place where people meet daily, this reminder has a stronger impact than any administrative regulation. Cultural diversity doesn't turn Migingo into a hotbed of conflict, but rather creates a form of coexistence based on compromise. People prioritize avoiding confrontation unless absolutely necessary, as prolonged conflict can directly affect daily life and work. Having to navigate the same narrow paths and encounter the same faces every day, yielding and controlling emotions become survival skills. This is what helps the island maintain order despite the lack of formal governance. Besides daily life, small gatherings take place regularly. These aren't major events, but rather periods for relieving stress after work. In a crowded environment, creating shared spaces helps the community maintain balance. A few small cafes, where people chat or listen to music, act as emotional release valve for the entire island. The Migingo community, therefore, is neither romantic nor entirely harsh. It is a collection of people who learn to adapt and tolerate each other to coexist in a space where almost no one can stand outside the fold. Here, the bond doesn't stem from ideals, but from a shared need for survival. Number 14. Unbelievable facts about Migingo Island. On Migingo Island, the most intriguing aspect isn't the lives of its inhabitants or the conflicts surrounding their livelihoods, but rather the inexplicable way this small island has survived. Migingo is so small that on many world maps, it appears only as a faint dot, sometimes even without a name. Without favorable natural conditions, urban planning, or long-term development goals, a community has lived there for many years. The origin of Migingo remains largely debated. Some believe it was an exposed rock formation in Lake Victoria. Others suggest the island was formed from the accumulation of sediment and materials during a long geological transformation. Regardless of the explanation, Migingo is clearly not a space designed for human habitation. There is no arable land, no stable freshwater source, and no potential for expanding habitable space. Some regional researchers have noted that the island's surface structure is susceptible to weathering and erosion, making permanent construction even more difficult. Yet, people still exist here, not because the place offers stability, but because Migingo became a temporary stopover that gradually transformed into a permanent home. One group of inhabitants followed another, building temporary structures, establishing temporary habits, and over time, transience became the norm. Some fishermen believe that leaving the island for just a few months could mean losing their livelihood, so many choose to stay despite the harsh conditions. The island's existence is not the result of a plan, but a series of short-term choices that have lasted for many years. Migingo challenges the familiar assumption that humans can only live stably in places with suitable conditions. On this island, survival isn't based on natural advantages, but on resilience, adaptation, and the constant acceptance of risk. But that also raises a difficult question. If a place wasn't designed for humans, yet humans still cling to it, where does the ultimate limit of adaptation lie? Is that perseverance a human strength, or the price paid when there are no other options? Migingo still exists, but its existence isn't tied to a clear vision of the future. And perhaps it is precisely this ambiguity that makes this island unique. Number 15. A place not designed for human habitation. On Migingo Island, the state of temporary is no longer a phase, but has become a long-term way of life. Most things on the island are built with the mindset that they can be dismantled, replaced, or patched up at any time. Houses are made of corrugated iron and thin wood. Narrow pathways are pieced together according to immediate needs. There is no overall plan for tomorrow, because even today is always subject to change. This temporary nature doesn't stem from carelessness, but from circumstances. When land doesn't allow for expansion, when regulations remain ambiguous, investing in sustainable things becomes risky. People are accustomed to repairing damage instead of building new, reinforcing weak points instead of comprehensive renovation. Every decision is short-term, focused on what's needed, just enough to get by. The future is an elusive concept. Living in this state for a long time creates a unique form of adaptation. People rarely plan far ahead, not because of a lack of willpower, but because the environment doesn't encourage it. When everything can change without warning, stability becomes the most temporary thing. Life is therefore measured in short periods, weeks, months, rather than years. It's noteworthy that this prolonged transience doesn't cause Migingo to collapse. It continues to function, maintaining its own rhythm of life. But the price is the lack of a clear destination. The island exists in a state of limbo, neither moving forward nor backward. Familiarity with transience diminishes the sense of urgency for change, while simultaneously blurring the concept of an alternative future. Migingo is therefore not just a temporary dwelling place. It is a place where transience has become the norm, and this raises a larger question about the limits of adaptation. If you enjoyed exploring the fascinating culture of Migingo with us today, remember to hit the like button, share your thoughts in the comments below, and subscribe to our channel. We'll bring you many more incredible journeys and hidden stories from around the world, and you won't want to miss them. Thank you for watching, and see you on the next adventure.